Hear me okay out there?
Yep.
Oh, there we
Yeah,
go.
There we go.
There you go.
When
Okay, thanks. Welcome, everybody, to the Sarpy County and City's Wastewater Agency meeting. It's Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. It's 4 o'clock. Copy of the Nebraska Opens Meeting Act is on the north wall. Anybody in attendance can speak on any matter on the agenda if they so desire, but if you want to do that, please make yourself known. And if you come forward, we're going to ask you to state your name and address for the record. In attendance today, we have the mayor of Springfield, Bob Roseland, the mayor of Gretna, Mike Evans, the public works director for the city of La Vista, Joe Susi, the mayor of Bellevue, Rusty Hike, the mayor of Papillion, David Black. I'm Don Kelly, representing Sarpy County. We also have our agency administrator here, Dan Hoynes, our agency treasurer, Mark Setow, our legal counsel, Adam Charlson, and our secretary, Lisa Hare. If you would, silence your phones, and let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any announcements from the board? Okay, then we'll get right into our administrator's report. Dan Hoynes, agency administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member mayors, I'd like to call attention to, if you weren't aware, that there's a familiar face back in the crowd, Nicole Spitzenberger, working for Sarpy County. I had the pleasure of working with Nicole when I was with the county and she was with the county. She was very involved in all of the sewer agreements and stuff, so it's welcome Nicole back in here. And I mentioned that because when I was talking to her, I thought I failed to mention, I think even in my written report, but we had our official first flush on December 20th at 5:08 p.m. A lot of years in the making there. Right now we're just connected to the Sarpy line. Everything that was flowing north is now flowing south down through our system, and we're working to Springfield to do that. But we have a really light agenda, and it hasn't been for lack of things going on. So I do want to take a couple of minutes to socialize you, Mr. Chair, member mayors, with some things that are going to be coming up next month. I've been working with your administrators and will continue to work with them. The very first subject or matter, I expect a resolution to come up February 26th, seeking authorization to seek loan modification and negotiate terms to modify the WIFIA loan, to use it for the design, permitting, and easement acquisitions for the Phase 1B, Phase 2 of the agency master plan that you approved on November 20th. I know that Adam and Bonnie have reached terms on language, I think. I saw an email last week. I'll be briefing your administrators on the specifics of that resolution tomorrow at our meeting, and then we'll be sending that up. The EPA takes about 45 to 60 days to analyze it, but if everything moves smoothly, and the county board also has to approve the request for the modification, so we'll coordinate those approvals with Bonnie, but they take about 45 to 60 days in their review. So if everything moves, smoothly, we could be back before you for a modified loan in as early as May. It is federal government, so maybe June, but then we already are teed up to present some contracts for that, and that's a 12 to 18-month process, but that kind of gives you a high level. I just think there's a significant difference in impact of having a line on a piece of paper and actually owning the easements and saying that's where that line's going to go. It will create a lot of certainty, and I think that's the next phase for us. We do have Tim Gase set up a meeting with Senator Fisher's office on February 4th. The chair, vice chair, me, Jeff, some others will be on the call, just rattling the trees, trying to find, because while the DPE's $13+ million, there's $250 million worth of construction costs. that, we need to try and find solutions for here in the near future. Also, I'm working with Tim Gay. There's one bill, I'm sure city mayors, you're aware of it, LB 117, to exempt sales and use tax and sewer tax, electricity tax. I'm working with Tim. He and I had an early conversation on that. We're formally in the monitor phase of that bill for the agency, but if it were to tilt to where there's any negative revenue impact, and we generated $713,000 last year, I think, in pilot revenues alone, pretty significant. So Tim's helping us monitor that. I'm sure maybe as city mayors you're watching that. So if you see something that you think's in your role is there that we may miss, please let me know and we'll stay on top of that. Also spending a significant amount of time right now on the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget, the one that ends June 30, starts July 1, coming up. It's significant because we're not going near the construction cost, but we're going into the O&M phase of it. The numbers are going to be lower because we're not spending $60 million on construction, but learning how to grow as an agency, and really significant in our discussions. Mark, I don't want to steal some of his thunder. I'll let him give you the numbers on his financial dashboard in here, but we are significantly ahead of the bell curve on collection connection fees. We don't have any control over those, as you're well aware. It's development driven. But how to work with your administrators on those excess revenues, certainly making sure debt service requirements are there, certainly future capital improvement programs are there, and I think equally important is working with them on a reimbursement policy for anybody that wants to advance those. So I know we've had a lot of discussion, but now we're putting pencil to paper with numbers. We'll start. My plan is to have a work session with your admins out at our office for at least 2 or 3 hours in March, once we have the draft as agency staff, and start to get their input, guidance, and stuff. And I'm sure they'll communicate that with you, but I want to let you know that's out there. Also, last fall, I worked with the chair and vice chair. We hired our first employee in 2021, Jeff Thompson, under an employment contract. At the same time, we adopted, actually, I'll call it a foundational employee manual. And there's one sentence about how we determine compensation. There's one sentence about how raises are awarded. It's very light. So I'm working with the chair and vice chair. I get the results of the survey, the final survey. There's a draft out there. Friday, I think I'm getting it from the consultant. Well, I don't venture it'll change a lot. But in February, I'm working on proposing, with the chair and the vice chair, the agency board adopting the range consistent with this study in the market, and then amendments to the employee manual that put in how we award raises, how we do certain things in there. So that's coming up, a lot of detail coming through on the compensation. So I started with the first flush. We're also going to meet with your folks tomorrow. I think I have 4 different dates for a very formal public-facing first flush ceremony with dignitaries, you folks, and others. Probably late spring coming up, but I think it's a time for us to get up and say that we're open for business and we're ready to go. I'll stop there, but I want to pick up Jeff. Jeff's on vacation this week. Telling Mayor Black, even though he just spent 2 hours on a budget meeting with us from his vacation. From a connection standpoint, talked briefly about it, and we're working. There's some tweaking, for lack of a better term, with the flow monitors. Our agreement with Springfield requires that they get a 30-day period to be able to determine what is actual wastewater flow and what they call I&I inflow and infiltration. So we have the numbers for Sarpy. We've had those for a while. We know they're good, but we have to, it's still plugged, for lack of a better term, the Springfield line. I know that Jeff is almost in daily communication with Jeremy Walker, the engineer, and I think we're closer, but not fully resolved to pull the plug, if you will, on the Springfield line and get that in. And finally, last thing, I'll put my report here Mr. Chair, Member Mayors, is we met with the City of Omaha last week. Our 2020 agreement with the City of Omaha stipulates that we pay them $293 per connection to offset their previous costs and such. So we've been tracking that, been reserving that in the budget over time. It wasn't due until we actually made the connection to Omaha, which we did in December. So we met with them. Think we have agreement on a number, but that'll be coming up under claims to true up with Omaha the percentage. And it's about 5% of the connection fee, just to scale that 293 as we're working through that. But we'll be made whole with Omaha, and they've been a great partner on this. Tens of millions of dollars of savings versus us trying to run our own plant down there on Mayor Springfield City. So I'll pause there, but there is a lot going on, even though we don't, have specific agenda items. February is going to be busy, February 26th, and I am working with your folks to try and make sure you're right in. So any questions, Mr. Chair?
No, any questions for Dan?
And Jeff's on vacation, so you can call our treasurer up next.
Okay.
Just an engineering question. So with Springfield, is there enough flow to get it to the other side of the county, or do they have to add water to that, or how?
I don't know, and I would hate to guess, Mayor. I'm certain they engineered it so that it could. I mean, they've had flow from their own plant. I know that it's less than 1 MGD for both the Sarpy line and the Springfield line, like a half of MGD, but they were well aware of that when they built that line and designed the station. So if they're not, that will be a problem. Thank you.
Okay. No project engineer updates, so we'll go right to number 3, financial dashboard. Mark set out. Agency treasurer.
Having a little trouble hearing you now, Don. Yes.
Sorry, that's probably my fault.
Are you going to pull that up?
It's down at the bottom of the screen, one of the PDFs. There you go.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Setout. I'm the agency treasurer. This is the agency's monthly financial dashboard report. It is modeled off of a similar report used by Sarpy County. We are aiming to give the board a high-level snapshot of the agency's financials in a format that is easy to digest, allows the board members to ask questions about the financials when necessary, and provides additional financial transparency along with the financial reports. So all the numbers here on this document represent the current fiscal year. So that's from July 1, 2024 through December 31, 2024. For revenues, we start with connection fees. Those are the amounts we have received from the agency members' jurisdictions. And again, these numbers are fiscal year to date. So in the first half of the year, the agency has already significantly exceeded the budgeted amount of connection fees. That was $900,000. Next is the flow revenue, which we did not have any flow revenue in the first half of the year. We are budgeting about $426,000 for the year. That number was based on only having flow for the second half of the year. And we will start to have those flow revenues in the coming months. As Dan said, we had our first flow. The federal earmark grants are pretty straightforward. We collected everything that we had budgeted out for those. The Nebraska DNR contract, that $1.7 million is the last of the $10 million that we collected. So that's what we collected during this period, and we have collected the full $10 million to date. The cold water blowdown, we have not collected any revenues in the first half of the fiscal year, but we anticipate revenues in future months this year. We collected $33,000 for the Gemini Future ISS Replacement Fund, and interest income of $160,000 from 5 Points Bank. And that puts our total revenue just over $10 million and 120% over what we had budgeted for the entire fiscal year. Next up are the expenses, and I'm just going to point directly to the total expenses, which are just over $10 million. And halfway through the year, we're coming in at 43% of budget. Does anybody have any questions on the revenues or expenses?
On the revenues, you said we budgeted $426,000 for flow revenue. I mean, you think we're going to meet that, or?
I think it'll be very close. It really kind of depends on us getting Springfield hooked on sooner than later, but they had real numbers and it was a conservative estimate, so I feel pretty confident we're on task.
Yeah, all that came from the rate study, but they are conservative numbers, so.
Any questions about the financials? Okay, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, on to the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda. Unless any agency member wants to see those discussed on the regular agenda, I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Gretna, second by Springfield. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Yea, 6, nays none, motion carried.
Okay, the only agenda item tonight is the presentation of on the regular agenda is our audit report for 23-24, Tim Lenz, Creative Planning, Bergen KDV.
Good afternoon, board members. Thanks for having me. Included in your packet, you have 2 items. You have the audit report over the financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30 of 2024, and then also our letter to those charged with governance, so our letter to have in writing with you all. Pretty similar report to what we've had in prior years. Just kind of give you the high-level points, and then if you want to dive into details and spend all night, we can do that too. But pages 1 through 3, that is our audit report over the financial statements. What that is saying is that we're giving a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion over those financial statements as they're presented. So they're in compliance with the standards that they need to be complied with. They're on the accrual basis, so liabilities and receivables are shown on there. Following that are the financial statements, and we're opining on the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements. So the difference there, government-wide financial statements show the entity as a whole, shows all your long-term assets, long-term liabilities, so your capital assets and debt, basically. Those are found on pages 12 and 13. Following that, pages 14 and 15, you have your fund financial statements, so just more current presentation of what your current liabilities, current assets are. And then there's a reconciliation below each of those explaining the differences between what's on the government-wide financials versus what's on the fund financial statement there. Following that, notes to the financial statements, nothing to draw your attention there. Just talks about significant accounting policies and other significant disclosures to add some language to the actual numbers of the financial statements. Also included in the audit report packet there is management's discussion and analysis. That's pages 5 through 10. That just gives a little narrative to the reader of the financial statements that Dan and team kind of tailor. We make sure the numbers tied to the numbers in the financial statements, but just gives a narrative to the financial statements themselves. Pages 26 through 27, you find the budgetary schedule. So looking at the cash in, cash out versus what the budget was for FY 23-24. Did not note any non-compliance with the adopted budget that the agency adopted for the fiscal year. Pages 30 and 31, that's your schedule of expenses of federal funds, your CFA. This year, the agency expended just over $35 million of federal funds, most of that being loan funds, but also had some coronavirus aid funds that were passed through to the agency to spend down, so not a loan program. Pages 32, 33, we get on to our report over compliance and internal controls over financial reporting. Have two findings there. One was a repeat finding from last year, just segregation of duties. I know Dan's communicated to you all on what that all entails. The agency has made strides to improve over the year, so you're definitely in a better spot than you were last year. But as I mentioned last year in my report, an agency your size with a staff of 4, it's hard to segregate everything. So that's going to be a common finding for organizations of your size. But Dan and team are very keen to making what improvements that can be made. So we've worked with him to try to segregate duties where they can be and implement some detective controls that just a second set of eyes on stuff to make sure that nothing out of the ordinary would happen. The other finding is a material weakness. As you all know, you had 4 treasurers throughout the last year. So through our audit, we had some material audit adjustments that were needed to get the financials into the state that they're currently in. I feel like Mark on board, I feel like that finding should probably fade away over this next year. Just a lot of turning over of hands of the financials. In our communications letter, we enumerate those journal entries, and happy to dive into those if you want to understand the debits and credits of those. But other than our material weakness in our report, nothing that we're concerned about going forward. Pages 34 and 36, that's a report over compliance over each major federal program due to the agency expending more than the $750,000 of federal funds. We analyzed what programs will trigger as a major program that we have to test this year. It was the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, the CSLFRS funds, and then also the WIFIA loan program was the other federal program that we tested. And that report just indicates that we had no material weaknesses in internal controls identified over the compliance of those federal programs, and no material weaknesses in internal controls. So that's a clean report. There's a nice summary on page 37 of the financial statement report that just summarizes everything I just told you. So if you don't want to read all the pages of it, just flip to page 37. The other item is our communications letter. No ingress issues there to draw your attention to. And as I mentioned earlier, there are our journal entries that we proposed and management has corrected attached to that letter. But happy to answer any questions that any of you all may have.
Questions, comments? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your help. Okay, item number 7, our next meeting will be February 26, 2025. All the agenda items having been addressed as published, the Sarpy County and City's Wastewater Agency Board is adjourned. See you next month.